Hello, my dear students. Welcome to this program. Today, we will be talking about minorities in South Asia with special reference to Rohingyas in Burma. The focus of this lecture will be on following objectives. First, what is minority? Second, overview of minorities in South Asia. Third, who are the Rohingyas? Fourth, what is the legal status of Rohingyas? And the last, why are Rohingyas fleeing Myanmar? So let's have first the conceptual understanding as what is minority. A minority group by its original definition refers to a group of people whose practices, race, religion, ethnicity and other characteristics are fewer in numbers than the main groups of society. In other words, minority or minority groups is a subgroup of the population with unique social, religious, ethnic, racial and other characteristics that differ from those of a majority group. The term usually refers to any group that is subjected to oppression and discrimination by those in more powerful social positions, whether or not the group is in a numerical minority. Examples of groups that have been labeled minorities include Afro-Americans, women, and immigrants, among others. Thus, it is defined as an ethnic, religious, or linguistic minority in any group of persons which constitutes less than half of the population in the entire territory of the state, whose members share common characteristics of culture, religion, or language, or a combination of any of these. Minorities include groups who are less in number to the rest of the population of the state, are in non-dominant position, reside in the state being either nationals or groups with close, long-standing ties to the state, possess ethnic, religious or linguistic characteristics differing from those of rest of the population, and show, if only implicitly, a sense of solidarity directed towards preserving their distinctive collective identity. Generally, minority groups are recognized to include national, ethnic, cultural, religious minorities as well as some migrants, refugees and indigenous and tribal people. It's also important to consider that minorities are likely to be discriminated against or marginalized, and they may develop increased group loyalty as a result of discriminatory and marginalized relations with the state. Dear students, let's have an overview of minorities in South Asia. South Asia is historically multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual society that lives in the countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. These states are home to a rich and diverse spectrum of nationalities, ethnicities, religions, indigenous groups, and an estimated 800 languages. First, we will discuss the case of India. In India alone, it's estimated that about 200 languages are spoken by people belonging to diverse minority groups all over the country, and approximately 84.2 million scheduled tribes are living in country. According to the census 2011, religious minorities constitute 19% of the total population, including Muslims 14.2%, Christians 2.3%, Sikhs 1.7%, Buddhists 0.7%, Jains 0.4% and others 0.7%. Muslims in India suffer a strong discrimination, and ongoing conflict between Hindus and Muslims has become a major issue in India. Some people and parties use this conflict for a benefit, which leads even more unpleasant situations. Nevertheless, in some parts of the country, like the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, where there is a majority Muslim community, Hindus are considered minority group. Even though Christians are minority group, they find themselves in a majority in their own respective states of Northeast. But in some other states like Orissa, there have been cases of offense against Christians, like the water poisoning in a relief camp, or in other parts of the country they have been threatened with their life and consequently scared to return to their village. Sikhs, finally, were never considered as a religious minority until the Sikh massacre in 1984 after Indira Gandhi's murder on 31st October, which posed the question of their security. Additionally, Dalits are still at the lowest strata of Indian society. Although Indian Constitution has made untouchability illegal, it's still widely practiced in many parts of the country. Dalits usually work in very humble situations and in hard conditions. It's not uncommon to hear of deaths due to methane gas exposure found in the sewers. Moreover, many Dalit children drop out from the schools due to discrimination by their classmates and also from their teachers. Illiteracy plays a major role. The few Dalits who have struggled and finished their university education continue to face discrimination at work. There have been many cases where well-qualified Dalits were rejected for the job and less qualified non-Dalits were appointed. Lack of awareness about their rights also makes them vulnerable for exploitation from other groups. Many NGOs and other organizations are working for the empowerment of Dalits. They are trying to bring justice for the cruelty, but only few cases have been successful. In India, many say that if you are born as a Dalit, you are born with all kinds of humiliations and discriminations. Pakistan also have minorities who face problems. Pakistan also recognizes religious minorities like Hindu, Sikh, Christian and Ahmadiyas. Many Hindus and Sikhs nevertheless feel insecure and many have migrated to India. The religious minorities are scattered all over the country, with Christians in Punjab, Hindus in Sindh, Parsis in Karachi, Sikhs in Balochistan, Biharis in urban centers, etc. Although the government has imposed laws favoring minorities, religious minorities still suffer from blasphemy charges, conversion of religion, illegal detention, custodial killings, and many more in every part of the country. In February 2009, a Punjabi Christian was arrested for sending a blasphemous text from his mobile. According to Voice of Martyrs blog, a Christian organization, Muslim refugees from Swat Valley are provided with shelter, food, medical facilities and transportation. On the other hand, Christian refugees are not provided with sufficient facilities. Finally, Hindus in Pakistan have been suffering for AIDS as Muslims suffered in India. The prominent case of Babri Mosque in the city of Ayodhya, apparently built on a Hindu ancient temple during the 16th century and destroyed by Hindu nationalists in 1992, led to a massive destruction of property and death in both the countries. Now let's have a look on minorities in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, officially the People's Republic of Bangladesh, where the majority ethnicity is Bengali and ethno linguistic group comprising over 98% of the population. According to 2011 census, approximately 1.8% of the population are indigenous Adivasis, amounting around 1.6 million, though some community representatives claim the actual figure is considerably higher. Ahmadi Muslims face discrimination mainly because they accept 4 of the 5 basic principles of Islam, but they do not accept the 5th one, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Makkah. Hence, the Muslim majority want them to be declared as non-Muslims. Despite constitutional rights of equality and protection against exploitation, there have been cases of Islamist groups threatening to attack Ahmadiyya's places of worship. Christians, especially those converted from Islam, are even more vulnerable. Hindus are also one of the religious minorities in Bangladesh. In October 2021, there were attacks on at least 80 of the 32,000 makeshift temples at the Durga Puja, the biggest annual Hindu festival. Over 3,600 attacks on the religious minorities took place between 2013 and 2021. Moreover, Bangladesh has 13 main tribes from which Chakmas, Marmas and Tripuras make 90% of the total tribal indigenous population. Chakmas are the largest group. They are mainly situated in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, where they are also referred as Juma, which represent 10% of the total land of Bangladesh. Now let's have a look on Sri Lanka and its minorities. Sri Lanka has been torn apart by civil war between the government and the Liberation Tiger of Tamil Eelam, also known as Tamil Tigers, for over 26 years. The civil war has taken over 80,000 lives on both sides. The Sri Lankan population consists of Sinhalese 74.9%, Sri Lankan Tamils 11.2%, Sri Lankan Moors 9.2%, and Indian Tamils 4.2%. The minority Tamils have suffered a long-running grievances of mistreatment by the majority Sinhala government. After the recent defeat of L32 and killing of its leader Prabhakaran, the conflict seems to have settled down. In May 2009, the president gave a speech in the parliament requesting all Sri Lankans who fled the country due to the war to return. He also spoke of developing the country as a nation with no more minority communities. Now let's have a look on the case of Nepal. Nepal, the former Hindu monarchy and Hinduism as the state religion, ruled for centuries. The system of governance was also based on Hindu scriptures. Only Buddhism was accepted as a part of Hindu society, and the followers of this religion were not discriminated against in the kingdom. Nowadays, religious minorities in Nepal are Muslims and Christians, and both communities are mainly settled in Terai region in addition to the Christians settling in the Kathmandu and Pokhara. It's also not uncommon for the Nepali Christians to be threatened and told to leave the country. The Nepal Defense Army, a Hindu fundamentalist organization, accused the Christians of polluting the nation and wanted them to leave Nepal within a month. Their goal is to achieve a Hindu-only Nepal. Muslims of Nepal have been fighting for their basic rights for a long time. Muslims, which constitute 4.4% of total population, ask for quotas in the parliament and civil services, and they are also demanding recognition for Islamic national holidays. Now, if we look at Afghanistan, Afghanistan also has many ethnic, tribal and religious minorities. Islam is the state religion with majority Sunni Muslim and minority Shias. But we can also find Sikhs, Hindus, Jews and Sufis in situ. There are several ethnic groups: Pashtuns all over the country, the Tajiks in the north, northeast and in Kabul region, the Hazaras in the central areas and in Kabul, the Uzbeks in the north, the Aimak in the west, the Turkmen in the north, the Baluchis in the north and northwest, and Nuretians in the east. Similarly, if we have a look on Bhutan, since the late 1800s, Nepalese workers have migrated to southern Bhutan in search of farmland and a better life. The region, which is warmer and prone to malaria, had long been shunned by nation's majority, Drupkas, who live in the cooler northern areas. By the mid of 1980s, ethnic Nepalese made up roughly 30% of Bhutan's population, retaining their culture, language and Hindu religion. That changed in 1985 under the King's One Nation, One People campaign, which mandated all the citizens to adapt Drupka dress and speak Dongga language. Many Nepalese were stripped of their citizenship if they lacked the papers to prove their residency prior to 1958. Deep inside, they knew they never belonged to this country, said Prime Minister Jigme Thenle. As to religious minorities, Christians in Bhutan have been forbidden to worship, since it's against the law to practice any religion other than Buddhism and Hinduism. The penalties for disobeying the rules include the loss of free education for children, termination of jobs, cancellation of trade license, withdrawal of state benefits, loss of promotion and training opportunities, restriction of movement, and for repeated offence, exile from the country. Dear students, now we will focus on Rohingyas in Myanmar. So who are the Rohingyas? The Rohingyas are an ethnic Muslim minority who practice Sufi-inflected variation of Sunni Islam. There are an estimated 3.5 million Rohingyas dispersed worldwide. Before August 2017, the majority of estimated 1 million Rohingyas in Myanmar resided in Rakhine State, where they accounted for nearly a third of the population. They differ from Myanmar's dominant Buddhist groups ethnically, linguistically, and religiously. The Rohingyas trace their origin in the region to the 15th century, when thousands of Muslims came to former Arakan Kingdom. Many others arrived during 19th and early 20th century, when Rakhine was governed by the colonial rule as a part of British India. Since independence in 1948, successive governments in Burma, which was renamed Myanmar in 1989, have refuted the Rohingyas' historical claim and denied the group recognition as one of the country's 135th official ethnic group. The Rohingyas are considered illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, even though many trace their roots in Myanmar back centuries. Neither the central government nor Rakhine's dominant ethnic Buddhist group known as Rakhine recognize the label Rohingya as self-identifying term that surfaced in 1950s, which experts say provides the group with a collective political identity. Though etymological root of word is disputed, the most widely accepted theory is that Rohang derives from the word Arakan in the Rohingya dialect, and Ga or Gya means from. By identifying as Rohingyas, the ethnic Muslim group asserts their ties to land that was once under the control of Arakan Kingdom, according to Chris Lava, the director of Arakan Project, a Thailand-based advocacy group. Now let's see What is the legal status of the Rohingyas in Burma? The government refuses to grant Rohingyas citizenship, and as a result, most of the group members have no legal documentation, effectively making them stateless. Myanmar's 1948 citizenship law was already exclusionary, and the military junta, which seized power in 1962, introduced another law 20 years later that stripped the Rohingyas of access to full citizenship. Until recently, the Rohingyas have been able to register as temporary residents with the identification cards known as the white cards, which the junta began issuing to many Muslims, both Rohingyas and non-Rohingyas, in the 1990s. The white cards conferred limited rights but were not recognized as a proof of citizenship. In 2014, the government held a UN-backed national census, its first in 30 years. The Muslim minority group was initially permitted to identify as Rohingya, but after Buddhist nationalists threatened to boycott the census, the government decided Rohingyas could only register if they identified as Bengali instead. Similarly, under the pressure from Buddhist nationalists protesting the Rohingyas' right to vote in 2015 constitutional referendum, President Thein Sein cancelled the temporary identity cards in February 2015, effectively revoking their newly gained right to vote. White card holders were allowed to vote in Myanmar in 2008 constitutional referendum and 2010 general elections. In 2015 elections, which were widely hailed by international monitors as free and fair, no parliamentary candidate was of the Muslim faith. The government has forced Rohingyas to start carrying national verification cards that effectively identify them as foreigners and do not grant them citizenship, according to the report by the advocacy group Fortify Rights. Myanmar officials have said the cards are an initial step towards citizenship, but critics argue that they deny Rohingyas their identity and could make it easier for the government to further repress their rights. In contemporary times, an important question that comes to mind is why Rohingyas are fleeing Myanmar. The Myanmar government has effectively institutionalized discrimination against the ethnic group through restrictions on marriage, family planning, employment, education, religious choice, and freedom of movement. For example, Rohingya couples in the northern town of Mukdaon and Butingdong are only allowed to have 2 children. Rohingyas must also seek permission to marry, which may require them to bribe authorities and provide photographs of bride without headscarf and groom with a clean-shaved face, practices that conflict with Muslim customs. To move to a new home or travel outside their township, Rohingyas must gain government approval. Moreover, Rakhine State in Myanmar, least developed state with a poverty rate of 78% compared to the 37.5% national average according to World Bank estimates. Widespread poverty, poor infrastructure, and lack of employment opportunities in Rakhine have exacerbated the cleavage between Buddhists and the Muslim Rohingyas. This tension is deepened by the religious differences that have at times erupted into conflict. Clashes in Rakhine broke out in August 2017 after a militant group known as Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army claimed responsibility for attacks on police and army posts. The government declared ARSA a terrorist organization and military mounted a brutal campaign that destroyed hundreds of Rohingya villages and forced nearly 700,000 Rohingyas to leave Myanmar. At least 6,700 Rohingyas were killed in first month of attacks between August 25th and September 24, 2017, according to the international medical charity Doctors Without Borders. Myanmar's security forces also allegedly opened fire on fleeing civilians and planted landmines near border crossing used by Rohingyas to flee to Bangladesh. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has described the violence as the ethnic cleansing and the humanitarian situation as catastrophic. Rights groups and other UN leaders suspect acts of genocide have taken place, and in September 2018, a UN fact-finding panel released a report that claimed the Myanmar government had genocidal intent against Rohingya. The chair of the UN panel said it found clear patterns of abuse by the military, including systematic targeting of civilians, committing sexual violence, promoting discriminatory rhetoric against minorities, and creating a climate of impunity for security forces. Since early 2018, Myanmar authorities have also reportedly cleared abandoned Rohingya villages and farmlands to build homes, security bases, and infrastructure. The government says this development is in preparation for repatriation of refugees, but rights activists have expressed concern these moves could be intended to accommodate population besides Rohingyas in Rakhine. Still, resentment of the minority group has run deep for generations. Well, dear students, in this lecture, we discussed about minority and who is minority in South Asian states like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, etc. We also discussed about the Rohingyas of Myanmar, talked about their legal status, their persecution, suffering, and the causes of their fleeing from the country. We also discussed the UN response about the sufferings of Rohingyas in Myanmar. I hope you had enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.